On the early hours of Sunday, it was clear to both Syria and Israel that the IDF defense at the south of the Golan has crumbled. Remnants of the 53rd Battalion, some 15 tanks, have gathered in Mount Fares, secluded from the rest of the Israeli force, which included 3 tanks from 679, held the road in the south leading to the Sea of Galilee. A company from the 82nd Battalion in Mount Yusifun, making necessary repairs and filling the tank's belly with ammunition. The 82nd Battalion B Company at Post 111, and Tzvika Force, basically one tank which requested and was granted permission to slowly retreat to the north. For the hours to come, it would be the only tank holding the road to the base. On the Syrian side, 51 and 46 were deep inside Khushnia. 132 was waiting in the south, and the Syrian High Command needed to decide what to do next. Things have gone well for them, but not as well as the Syrians expected and hoped. The IDF in the center and north was holding on with no significant ground won. The south front looked better, but pockets of resistance with unknown forces were still firing and detaining the 5th and 9th Infantry Divisions. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the 43rd Tank Brigade from the 9th Infantry Division was going over the anti-tank ditches. The reports from 51 and 46 made it clear there were hardly any enemy forces at the sector, and instead of attacking straight ahead to Nafach and to the center of the Golan, the 43rd was sent to attack the 7th Brigade in the north. Unfortunately for them, their movement was monitored by the Israelis at Post 111. 111th observers called their brigadier Bengal, who immediately identified the threat to his flank and ordered 82nd C Company to encounter the enemy. Zamir, C Company's commander, quickly stationed his forces in an ambush formation along the road the Syrians were expected to come from. Without night vision, he ordered to turn off the engines and to listen carefully to the roar of the 43rd Tank Brigade coming closer and closer. At 3:30, Zamir ordered to open fire from a range of just 1,200 meters. Within 2 hours, 30 of 40 Syrian tanks and armored vehicles were hit. The 43rd Brigadier announced on the radio that he was facing a large force ahead of him and asked to retreat. He was granted permission, and the 43rd Brigade ceased to exist. Its remnants were annexed to the 51st Brigade in the morning. 14 tanks from Israel's 266th Battalion arrived at the front. 6 were sent to the east to help out the 82nd Battalion, and 8 were sent to Tzvika at the oil road. 6 a.m. 188th Deputy collected 6 repair tanks from the tank shop at Nafach and joined Tzvika. For a while, the IDF headquarters assumed the situation is bad, but under control. Later that morning, 188th Brigadier said to his radio officer, "It's time to accept that we do not have a brigade anymore. Get me a tank and I will join what's left of it at the front." 188th Brigadier joined his forces at the oil road to the former lone tank called Tzvika Force to create now a force 16 tanks strong. This is probably why the first significant force to arrive at the scene was sent to the wrong place. At 7 o'clock, the 679th Brigadier arrived with 23 tanks to the Nafach base. After a short meeting with Eitan, the Golan commander, he was ordered to the south of Quneitra. It is hard to understand why. Eitan should have known an entire enemy division was at his doorstep, and only 16 tanks were stopping it to his south. On the Syrian side, early in the morning, the 47th Tank Brigade joined the 51st and 46th. By that time, the Syrians had some 300 tanks and a few hundred armored vehicles deep inside the south sector. While Israel assumed the worst was behind it, Syria's Armored Division 1 geared into action. At 8 o'clock, with the morning sun behind them, the 91st Tank Brigade entered the battle. This time, the Syrians planned a pincer attack east and west of the Nafach pocket. At 8 o'clock, the first fire exchange took place between the 91st and 58th Brigades and a small force from the 82nd Battalion. As ammunition ran out, 10 tanks from the 82nd and the 179th tried frantically to call someone at 188 to instruct them what to do. Since they couldn't get any response from 188 and the situation became desperate, they called their own brigadier, Bengal, and asked for instructions. In one of the most controversial decisions of the battle, Bengal instructed them to retreat to the 7th Brigade headquarters to replenish their tanks. This tank force never came back to confront Armored Division 1 or any part of it. No one at the Golan Operation Room knew about it, and the eastern side of the front has been left totally exposed. After the war, Bengal has been repeatedly asked about this decision, and his reply was, "I knew them very well, and there was never a question of not believing them. But to hear that an entire division so close to them and the 82nd facing total annihilation, I can't see what else I could have done." Just before midday, someone at the North Operation Room realized from different radio channels that there were at least 2 brigades attacking the Nafach base. They called 679 Brigadier, the only large force in the area, to head back to Nafach and hold back Brigade 91. 679 Brigadier Uri Or left a small force behind him to protect the gap south of the booster ridge, and with 15 tanks headed back west. All this time, completely unaware of the enemy movement towards his base, Eitan instructed the 93rd Battalion that just arrived to help the 188 at Khushnia. The 188 Brigadier wasn't even close. By this time, Khushnia was Syrian territory, fortified by more than a divisional force. The 93rd Battalion commander, Gottfried, with his 13 tanks, slowly and securely did as he was instructed east of the base. When he first noticed T-62s sliding from the ridge in front of him, his mind refused to accept those were really Syrian tanks. He tried calling them on different radio channels until fire broke out. The 93rd managed to hold back the 91st Brigade for some time, but at a very high price. Almost the entire 93rd Battalion was hit. Undetected by the Israeli forces in the area, the 51st Brigade took a path in a hidden creek west of the oil road. 3 tanks from different outfits formed an ad hoc force and fired at 51 on the edge of the base. They were all hit, but managed to report the enemy was very close. For some reason, no one at the sector command in Nafach understood the threat, and no one called to warn them. At 1 p.m., a staff officer decided to go and stretch his leg outside the command bunker. He took a better look and saw behind him dozens of T-62s sliding from the ridge. The staff officer ran back to the bunker and, trying to keep his calm, informed Eitan that the Syrians were at the gates. After a few seconds of disbelief, an order was issued to evacuate Nafach. At 1:30, Syrian tanks surrounded the fences. In retrospect, we can assume they were mostly interested in cutting off the logistic supports to the rest of the Israeli forces, rather than in fighting inside the base. The sector commander, Eitan, ordered Ben Shoham, 188 Brigadier, to quickly turn back north. The 15 tanks at the oil road were almost surrounded, and after 24 hours of continuous fire, exhausted and short of ammunition. And yet, small Israeli forces kept arriving at the base. A lieutenant named Anderson fired at the 51st Brigade at the south edge of the base. Ben Shoham left his deputy to guard his rear and rushed back to Nafach with Tzvika and some lost tanks from different outfits. This was anything but an organized attack. The forces rushing back to save the base did not even notice enemy tanks and infantry hidden between the rocks. From a distance, Ben Shoham could see dozens of T-62s on the very edge of the base. He called his deputy to join him. His deputy closed the gap and spotted targets less than a mile away. What they could not see was the Syrian infantry all around them. At 2:15, Yisraeli, the 188th deputy, was shot dead by a machine gun. At 2:30, the 188th Brigadier died in his tank alongside his operations officer. They too were hit by Syrian infantry machine guns. The 188th Brigade no longer existed. No one was answering the radio, and Zvika was trying to gather around lost tanks to attack the Syrians surrounding the base. Everything now depended on less than 20 tanks from Brigade 679. At noon, Oriol left a small force to guard behind and divided his 20 tanks into two forces. One commanded by Shefer, assigned to advance slowly along the road leading west to Nafach. The other, of 15 tanks, commanded by Or, went south in a maneuver meant to surprise the 91st from their flank. At 4 o'clock, Reinbach, who commanded 4 tanks protecting the oil road, was killed. What was left of his force retreated, and the main road leading to Nafach was open. The reports from the Egyptian front were horrible as well. A sense of gloom and doom ran across the command on the Israeli side. Dayan, charismatic and articulate in peacetimes, but under fire pale and clearly shocked, was reported to mumble something about the imminent destruction of the State of Israel. In his worst nightmares, he saw the IDF disintegrating and the Syrians sliding down from the Golan and taking the rest of Israel. This was, of course, a gross exaggeration. Most of the Israeli army has not even been recruited and organized, and the Syrians never thought of sliding down from the Golan. We know that because maps of northern Israel were never issued to their officers. At 4 o'clock, the last 3 tanks of 679 arrived to the front, commanded by Deputy Battalion Commander Danon. On their way, they were stopped by staff officers fleeing from the Nafach base, who told them where the enemy was and how bad things were. Danon decided to get off the paved road and surprise the 51st from their side. He collected some more lone tanks from other forces, and together they fired at the 51st Brigade. The Syrians were attacked by Or's forces from the east, a few tanks from the north commanded by Lieutenant Anderson, and now by Danon's force from the west. This time, the Syrian command has had enough and called off the attack. We can only guess why, as we have no Syrian sources on this. The Syrians were under fire from 3 sides and could not have possibly known that their attackers were fractions of forces from different outfits and very low on ammunition. With most of their army still intact, they might have thought that a second attack on the following day would be more successful. This was the peak of the Syrian army's success in the war. Later attempts were made to attack Nafach, but they were met by more organized forces that managed during Sunday night to fix the damaged tanks and get some much-needed rest. According to Soviet sources, Hafez al-Assad, the always prudent Syrian president, asked on Sunday night for a ceasefire. Surprised somehow, the Soviets inquired with the Egyptians, who replied with a hard no. A week later, the IDF forces encountered 3 divisions from the Jordanian and Iraqi expedition forces, threatened Damascus, and caused a dangerous rift between the USA and the Soviet Union.